So good afternoon, everyone. So special shout out to all my colleagues in the LSC conference room. This is the first I've, had a watch party in my in my honor. So I'd like to thank Mary Ann and all of you. She's obviously very familiar to many of you. So I won't tell you all the great work she has done in her professional career and her career as a leader in Catholic education. But I will tell you, as an alumnus of John Carroll, she was one of the first graduating class that included women from John Carroll. And also, she tells me that she was a very successful basketball player and that they had a perfect season until they won their first game, right? So thank you very much, Mary Ann, for your warm introduction. I want to thank John and the members of the Loyola Loyola Club Steering Committee for their invitation and support in preparing for today. It's quite a room I've been asked to entertain and enlighten today, and I'm grateful for all of you joining us. I fear that this title has raised expectations, talking about the next 500 years. So I'm a little nervous that I may have, raised expectations too high. Sarah, thank you for saying no, but we'll see how it goes, right? So in the title of today's program, I promised thoughts on the unprecedented nature of this time, our time. But before I make that case, let me take you back to another such moment in time. Imagine July 1943. That's when my father, Thaddeus Miciak, a first-generation Cleveland man of Polish descent, arrived with the 390th Bomb Group at Framlingham, Suffolk, England, in the thick of the final phases of the Second World War. World War II would prove to be the most heavily mechanized war that man had ever created, and would foreshadow the next 80 years that followed in terms of an economy that would run and grow on carbon. In the weeks after my father's arrival, Italy would be freed by the Allies, and the Vatican would narrowly escape the bombing raids with really minimal damage. The modernity of our warfare and the eternity of our religious ideals had come within a few hundred yards of a catastrophic collision. We were very lucky. Between 1942 and the end of the Second World War, my father was one of more than 2 million American troops who passed through Britain. Over that same period, 70,000 British women fell in love with 70,000 of those American GIs, and one of them was my mother, Dorothy King, later Dorothy Miciak. My mom was born in 1925, in the same year as one Margaret Hilda Roberts, later known to the world by her married name, Margaret Thatcher. While Margaret would stay close to home and one day lead her nation as prime minister, Dorothy would join hundreds of war brides who headed for the United States. Those young brides from England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland traveled aboard the USS Argentina in the Army's highly publicized Operation Diapers shuttle. The memory that lingered with my mom was a persistent seasickness and its association with chocolate ice cream, which she vowed never to eat again, and she did not. My mom and dad made their life first in Cleveland and then in Strongsville, Ohio. At that time, Cleveland was the 7th largest metro in the nation, and the population grew again by 2 when Dorothy and Ted adopted me and my brother Mark. So my dad went to work for the Astrup Company, a canvas and awning company that was launched in 1876. This is 10 years prior to the founding of St. Ignatius College that later became John Carroll University. Astrup was founded by Danish sailmaker William J.O. Astrup, who had come to the U.S. and settled in Cleveland around 1865. This was before Cleveland had Standard Oil, Sherwin-Williams, before Cleveland had a police department, and before the first blow from Bessemer Steel came off the line at the Cleveland rolling mills. In 1880, we would be the 12th largest city in the U.S., by 1890, the 10th. In 1896, we would celebrate our centennial, and a few years later, in 1900, we would be America's 7th largest city. Waves of Czechs, Poles, and Italians at first, and later the great migration of African Americans came to Cleveland. Cleveland's population grew 60% between 1910 and 1930. We were the 6th largest city in the U.S., and soon Jesse Owens would win 4 gold medals at the 1936 Olympics. Northeast Ohio would find its apex in 1957. The Browns stood as champions of the Eastern Conference, and Cleveland reached its peak population. Remember, the suburban share of Northeast Ohio's population jumped from 28% in 1940 to 62% in 1970. Astrup, who initially made expert sails for Great Lakes ships, showed that he could adapt when sails became obsolete. He turned to the manufacture of other canvas products, especially awnings, which grew in popularity with home and business owners. The tie between Astrup and the open water enjoyed a brief revival when it was contracted to supply all of the awnings and other fabric for SeaWorld, Ohio. How many of you remember SeaWorld, Ohio? Okay, all right. My dad's connections to the new park meant frequent SeaWorld visits. As a kid with mostly dormant business sense, it all seemed wonderful to me. In retrospect, we might ask a more discerning question. What made sense about locating this major attraction in suburban Northeast Ohio? When the park was announced in 1968, the location put it equidistant between Detroit and Pittsburgh, America's two largest and highest paid blue-collar populations. Our collective imagination could not foresee that the world had already started changing. Korea had been improving its steelmaking for 15 years. Japan's Nippon Steel Corporation would soon pass U.S. Steel as the world's largest steelmaker. Steel's close cousin, the automotive industry, also showed signs of slowing. In 1960, Detroit produced 93% of the cars sold in the U.S. and 48% of those sold in the entire world. And by 1967, Japan had passed Germany to become the second largest worldwide car producer. So steel production and Great Lakes manufacturing peaked in 1973, collapsed a decade later. On the one hand, we accepted quite willingly the sight of an orca whale leaping through the Northeast Ohio sky on blind faith. On the other hand, we could not imagine the demise of an industrial age that had won in war and, in most people's eyes, seemed invincible. So why do I share these histories, my family's, my own, and ours together? As president of John Carroll University, a school that relies heavily on recruiting students from across the Great Lakes, from Chicago to Pittsburgh, I will tell you that the aftershocks from those events in the 1970s still resonate. As we look ahead to what higher education analysts call the demographic cliff, no area of the country faces steeper decline in the number of traditional age college-going students. Still, I believe there's good news. While there have been many limitations on a place like how SeaWorld could adapt and thrive, the same is not true for colleges and universities. I believe that is especially true of John Carroll, given the strength and depth of our roots as a Jesuit institution. Let me attempt to connect a little bit more of my personal story, the story of Jesuit courage and innovation, and the story of change that we will write together. My wife, Ann, and I met in college, and we made our first higher education career move when I was offered a faculty position in Calgary, Alberta. The Jesuits had, of course, preceded me in Canada by nearly 400 years. They came as linguists, explorers, and ethnographers. They learned Aboriginal languages and customs, developed dictionaries and grammars, translated and preserved much of the First Nation history and traditions in their documents. During the period of papal suppression, from 1773 to 1814, there is no time in your future you will ever hear the word papal suppression twice in the period of an hour, right? But this is one of them. The Society of Jesus found safe harbor under the leadership of Bishop of Quebec, Jean-Olivier Briand, who refused to put the papal order into effect. The Jesuits kept their name and religious habit in Quebec and retained possession of their property. Jesuits founded some of their first North American universities in Canada, teaching in both French and English. Some of you might recall in my installation remarks in the fall, I referenced Ignatius of Loyola and his early supporters and the education legacy that they had created and that we now hold in trust. I said at the time, consider, if you will, the early Jesuits of the 16th century who, during the age of discovery, sought new, more effective ways to educate young people for an ever-expanding world. Their desire to give glory to God in all things and to help prepare people for an unknown future led them to establish a new international educational style, humanistic education that brought faith into dialogue with culture. In less than 2 centuries, they had established a network of some 800 educational institutions throughout the world, expressing their belief that every future should have a future and that future should begin with knowledge for the good of the world. I then asked the question, which I will repeat today. Can we approach our times and our role with the same patient deliberation and innovation modeled by those early Jesuits? Can we, too, imagine a better future? I can tell you with confidence that reimagining of futures is underway at John Carroll University. In my more than 30 years as a professor and dean, I was certainly acutely aware of my responsibilities to guide and educate young people. Even with that grounding, I know something changes when you're asked to lead a Jesuit institution from the front. So one of the resources that I've drawn on during these recent months have been the 4 apostolic preferences, which I will refer to as the Jesuit priorities. It's a little simpler for me, Father Lenauskas. Okay. So they are showing the way to God, walking with the excluded, journeying with youth, and caring for our common home. So let's explore the first priority, showing the way to God. I think we have all encountered something of what it means to discern how to live better with greater spiritual discernment day by day through this pandemic, right? It's been a challenge for everyone. When I talk to our students and recent graduates, I find that they are doing the hard work despite the cross currents, discovering their true vocations, reconciling the changes of our outer world, the economic and social, with the goal of finding purpose and meaning in their inner world, and keeping faith. We need everyone's support to continue to grow in our ability as a spiritual community to support young people in this process, both those who come from Catholic and Jesuit backgrounds and high schools, and those who come to John Carroll from other faiths and diverse backgrounds. Recent gifts toward our Jack, Joseph, and Morton Mandel Chair in Jewish Studies allow John Carroll to become a center for interreligious engagement around the 3 great Abrahamic traditions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. This most recent gift builds on others, the Jack and Mary Jane Breen Chair in Catholic Systematic Theology, established in 2011, the Bediüzzaman Said Nursi Chair in Islamic Studies, established in 2003, and the Walter and Mary Toohey Chair of Interreligious Studies, established in 1966, the first chair of ecumenism ever established at American Jesuit College or University. So interreligious engagement is one of but many ways we are, as an institution and a community and a region and a nation, been called to pursue and fulfill a more integrated future. So now let's look at the second priority, walking with the excluded. As an adopted child, and as someone who embraced the Catholic faith through marriage, and as someone who was welcomed into the Jesuit community through my deep commitment to John Carroll University and its mission, I have experienced firsthand this conversion in my own heart. As director of the work, my task is to see that this spirit seeks to unite and to lift up the most vulnerable through good work and an abiding sense of justice. While Catholic social teaching has always advocated for human dignity, the economic, political, social, and technological threats have grown in volume and velocity. And like all Catholic Jesuit liberal arts institutions, we have reached a crossroads. Our Jesuit tradition and mission guides us to be men and women with and for others, but in order to carry those ideals into our community and to the wider world, we need to thrive as men and women and be able to anticipate and help the excluded adapt to this complex work of the future. What we see in the US and as far away as Los Angeles and as near as rural parts of Ohio is that young people without access and skills are falling behind. As one of our alumni, a principal at a rural elementary school, says, we can't expect a 3rd grader to attend remote classes for 6 hours a day on a cell phone. One of our recent alums, Aisha Jami, works for an organization in Los Angeles called America on Tech. And that gives under-resourced minorities critical coding training and access to technology to bridge this digital divide. Let's jump to the third priority, journeying with youth. The Society of Jesus calls us to stand at their side, glimpse the future with them. We walk with them in order to perceive and discern where the Spirit is leading our world and our church. And we're very fortunate to work with youth every day. As I connect with and get to know so many of our current students and recent graduates, I'm both struck by the challenges that we have left for them to face and by their amazing talent, moral imagination, and resolve. So take Megan Baraducci. Megan is a neuroscience intensive care nurse practitioner with University Hospitals. She spent the last 2+ years caring for the most vulnerable COVID populations, elderly with late-stage dementia. Imagine the clinical, personal, and family conversations she has been having that have been critical to this success during the pandemic. And here's what she says about her John Carroll education and how it has kept her whole. Philosophy taught me how to think, to see other perspectives, and to be open to other ways of thinking. I use that critical thinking on a regular basis as an ICU nurse practitioner, taking in critical information, weeding through facts quickly, and finding solutions to problems in order to help save lives. It also helped me in dealing with patients and their families, reading situations and responses in order to better relate to them and guide them through making difficult decisions about the care we provide and the quality of life their loved ones may have remaining. As we embark on an ambitious agenda to launch a formal nursing program, we look to alumni like Megan as a reminder that our call as a Jesuit institution is not simply to help fill a nursing shortage, but to give this generation of nursing students a set of internal resources and eternal values that will steady them and better serve their patients. The final priority, caring for our common home. We have important work to do close to home on our campus to ensure that our institution remains strong, vital, and relevant for generations to come. And we have an eager generation of young people seeking the training, insights, and experience required to put our common home, this planet Earth, on a more sustainable path. Nathaniel Hayden is a JCU grad, a Fulbright scholar, and a PhD in plant pathology at The Ohio State University. He's founder of Levo, a nonprofit that works in places like Haiti to bring grassroots food security. And Nathan states his life work very simply: I am passionate about applying biology to promote social justice and feed a planet of 10 billion people. So young alumni like Megan, Aisha, and Nate epitomize how nonlinear our work as educators can and should be, must be. In his book, The Fuzzy and the Techie, Why the Liberal Arts Will Rule the Digital World, author Scott Hartley writes about what it takes to raise and inspire world-ready graduates built to withstand the disruption and thrive in this work of the future. And he says, we do a disservice to our young people by telling them that life is a straight path. As a Catholic and Jesuit university, we second his observation. Our most successful graduates remind us that a purposeful life rarely follows a straight path. At the same time, our Catholic and Jesuit tradition allows us to reassure young people that certain eternal truths keep us focused and moving under change and uncertainties. I'd like to read an excerpt from a book called What We Hold in Trust, and this is Rediscovering the Purpose of Catholic Higher Education. The authors write, the Catholic faith and its intellectual tradition developed over thousands of years brings to the university a language of deep interiority and ultimate finality that elevates and expands the mind. Faith brings to the university a formation of the soul that addresses aspects of life important for every young person, such as the search for meaning and the need for rich inner life, from which to confront one's nobility and failings, the discernment of one's vocation, and the contribution to the common good. Jesuit institutions are not most colleges, and we do not seek to enroll most prospects. We're not selling vocational degrees, but we're also not trying to escape from the harder complexities and realities of the world and retreat with a good classic text. We live at the applied edge of a broad core of learning and at the intersection of faith and reason. By linking knowledge to judgment and judgment to Christ-minded action across rapidly changing professions, John Carroll University and other institutions have moved to take liberal education out of the ivory tower and into the future work of the world, determined to create a more just and sustainable world. Let me offer one example. So we don't offer courses like History 307, History of the Popes, so that students can one day enjoy a tour of the Vatican. We teach such courses marked by a real breadth of study and deep critical thinking because firms such as Deloitte, McKinsey, and employers such as Goodyear and Sherwin-Williams tell us that too many recent graduates report for work unsure of how leadership dynamics impact individual and company performance. We teach core material and embrace the constructive tensions between faith and reason so that whatever path our students take, education, media, law, health, or engineering, they will not be confused or overwhelmed by an increasingly complex world. So as I look at both our considerable needs and demands and a breathtaking opportunity, I'm reminded of my father and his path to a college degree after the war. The GI Bill recognized that the future would require a new set of ambitions and abilities. Many have written about the opportunity it created for my father and 12 million other retired and active duty service women and men like him fundamentally changed the course of human history and created the modern knowledge economy. The GI Bill produced 22,000 dentists, 67,000 doctors, 91,000 scientists, 238,000 teachers, and 450,000 engineers, as well as 3 Supreme Court justices, 3 presidents, and 14 Nobel Prize winners. A 1988 congressional report estimated that for every dollar spent, the GI Bill returned $7 to the U.S. economy. Today, it will require a more collaborative model to achieve such a return on investment. Our students recognize that in order to claim the catalytic difference that an education such as ours can offer, they must network widely, risk failure, and find in their academic leaders a model of intellectual curiosity, professional leadership, and spiritual resiliency. Young people are shopping for a 4-year college experience that robot-proofs them against the mighty forces of change, technological, economic, political, social, environmental. They are also seeking that formation of the soul, the rich inner life, and the bonds of friendship from which to discern their future path. So we know that our region's economic future will require a new, more varied, and more culturally diverse ideas, investments, and talents. If we miss this opportunity, it will be to the detriment of not just the fortunate few who attend college, but to our entire democratic experiment. It's our time to show that a Jesuit education has not persisted for 500 years without the ability to shape and adapt to a changing world. This adaptation will ask my generation to follow the lead that our students have offered, an inherent optimism that learning matters, and a deep faith that we can sustain ourselves on a new, less narrow, and more generative shore of existence. Thank you all very much.